So my curiosity about the text is about the source and how Shakespeare is using the source. So what I've done is I've gone to Sir Thomas North's translation of Plutarch, and it's a very, very lengthy resource, and it's one that I hope some of you will find very interesting. So this is from Plutarch, translated in the 1580s by Sir Thomas North, and I've read down to the portion that influences the part of the text that I'm curious about. So I'm going to read you a little bit beforehand. You can skip over this if you want. Antonius, going to make war with the Parthians, sent to command Cleopatra, whom he hasn't met yet, to appear personally before him when he came into Cilicia, to answer unto such accusations as were laid against her, being this, that she had aided Cassius and Brutus in their war against him. The messenger sent unto Cleopatra to make this summons unto her was called Dellius, who, when he had thoroughly considered her beauty, the excellent grace and sweetness of her tongue, he nothing mistrusted that Antonius would do any hurt to her, to so noble a lady, but rather assured himself that within few days she should be in great favour with him. Thereupon he did her great honour, and persuaded her to come into Cilicia as honourably furnished as she could possible, and bade her not to be afraid at all of Antonius, for he was a more courteous lord than any that she had ever seen. Cleopatra, on this other side, believing Dellius's words, and guessing by the former access and credit she had with Julius Caesar and C. Pompey, the son of Pompey the Great, only for her beauty, she began to have good hope that she might more easily win Antonius. For Caesar and Pompey knew her when she was but a young thing, and remember her line about those were my salad days, when I was green in wisdom, I think she says, or judgment, green in judgment. So this is where Shakespeare gets that idea. So she says, for Caesar and Pompey knew her when she was but a young thing, and knew not then what the world meant. But now she went to Antonius at the age when a woman's beauty is at its prime, and she also of best judgment. So she furnished herself with a world of gifts, store of gold and silver, and of riches and other sumptuous ornaments, as is credible enough she might bring from so great a house, and from so wealthy and rich a realm as Egypt was. But look at this word sumptuous. You know, that's not just gorgeous or glittering. That bespeaks a kind of tremendous appeal, an appeal that is outsized. So, but yet she carried nothing with her wherein she trusted more than in herself, and in the charms and enchantment of her passing beauty and grace. And remember, this is an Elizabethan translation of an ancient text. Now here we come to this wonderful, influential section. Therefore, when she was sent unto by divers letters, both from Antonius himself and also from his friends, she made so light of it, and mocked Antonius so much, that she disdained to set forward otherwise, but to take her barge in the river of Kidnus, the poop whereof was of gold, the sails of purple, and the oars of silver, which kept stroke in rowing, after the sound of the music of flute, hautboys, citherns, viols, and such other instruments as they played upon in the barge. And now for the person of herself. She was laid under a pavilion of cloth of gold of tissue, apparelled and attired like the goddess Venus, commonly drawn in picture, and hard by her, on either hand of her, pretty fair boys, apparelled as painters do set forth God Cupid, with little fans in their hands, with the which they fanned wind upon her. So let's quickly compare a little bit from Shakespeare that's based on this from Sir Thomas North. And now we've just seen a discussion between Agrippa, Lepidus, Octavius, and Mark Antony, in which Octavius has obviously vented some of his frustrations with Antony, and Antony's been a little, not dismissive, but he's very relaxed about it. Octavius is very uptight, and he enumerates 1, 2, 3, these are my annoyances, these are where you let me down, this is why I'm angry. And Antony is sort of saying, yeah, you're right, well, I didn't exactly do it that way, but I was paying attention to something else. He's not behaving like a Roman. Anyway, Agrippa comes up with the idea that in order to bind them to each other, and let's have a look at that quotation, to hold you in perpetual amity, to make you brothers, and to knit your hearts with an unslipping knot, take Antony Octavia to his wife, whose beauty claims no worse a husband than the best of men, whose virtue and whose general graces speak that which none else can utter. By this marriage all little jealousies, which now seem great, and all great fears, which now import their dangers, would then be nothing. So this is Agrippa's argument in favor of it. And Antony says, what does Caesar think about that? Caesar says, I first want to hear what you have to say. And Antony says, well, Agrippa's the one who made the offer. Does he really have the authority to do that? And then Caesar says, he has the power of Caesar, and his power unto Octavia. In other words, Agrippa has the authority to speak for Caesar, and Caesar basically owns Octavia, so he gets to speak for what's going to happen to her. Anyway, they decide that that's a great idea. Lepidus is happy, Antony's happy, Caesar's happy. Anyway, they leave the stage, and we're left with Maecenas, Enobarbus, and Agrippa, and they begin to sort of josh him about what it's like to live in Egypt. And actually, this little anecdote about the 8 wild boars roasted whole at breakfast is one that you can find in North. We go down, and Agrippa says, according to my reporter who was there when they first met, Cleopatra is amazing, and Enobarbus can't help himself. Now remember, Enobarbus is a Roman, but he is still going to give us this lavish portrait that we find originally in North. But let's see what Shakespeare's done to it in order to embellish, enhance, and generate amongst the audience such a strong sense of what an extraordinary creature the Queen of Egypt is, Cleopatra. He says, I will tell you. The barge she sat in, like a burnished throne, burned on the water. The poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. And right away we see, yes, we've got the physical details from North, from Plutarch, from his translation. But we've got something so much more imaginative, so much more pushing against the boundaries of possibility. So here we've got, first of all, I did highlight this part again because I wanted to draw your attention to it. Cleopatra carried nothing with her wherein she trusted more than in herself and in the charms and enchantment of her passing beauty and grace. So this is a woman we're seeing who has an extraordinary sense of presence and confidence, and that's in Plutarch. We do get the basic details from North. So she decided to take her barge in the river Kidnus, the poop whereof was of gold, the sails of purple, and the oars of silver. So we were told all 3 of those things, and the oars kept stroke according to music, according to rhythm that was set up almost in the same way that a drum keeps the galley slaves rowing in rhythm. So, all right, the barge she sat on like a burnished throne, burned on the water. How would that have affected you as a member of Shakespeare's audience, imagining the brightness of the barge, perhaps at sunset, the western light hitting this burnished throne, this beaten barge of gold, with it being so ablaze with that light that it looked as if it burned on the water? Again, we're getting into this world of the metaphysical poets, of whom Donne, who was a contemporary, John Donne, a contemporary of Shakespeare, was such an expert. And even this imagery reminds us of John Donne, with his batter my heart 3-personed God, a sonnet using the terminology of silver and goldsmiths, in which they beat upon the gold in order to refine it. So here we have this burning on water, this impossibility. How do flames sit with water? Why doesn't the water quench them? Because it can't. The poop was beaten gold. purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick. I mean, yeah, we have perfumes over here. So we've got the ladies described, and we're going to see this later. And she says, out of the which came a wonderful passing sweet savor of perfumes that perfumed the wharf's side, pestered with innumerable multitudes of people. Okay, so in North's translation of Plutarch, which would have obeyed the grammatical structures of Plutarch's language, this is just one little detail that's thrown out between a description of Cleopatra's women who were steering the ship and then the people all the way along the wharf's side. But here we've got so perfumed. The sails, remember the sails in A Midsummer Night's Dream, they are romantic. They are things which conjure adventure, sailing, questing, curiosity, and beauty and potential. The sail in A Midsummer Night's Dream is shown to be like a pregnant body. It is full of potential. And here, so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. So the winds that filled out the sail were lovesick. Because of the perfume, because of the seductive quality. It wasn't just that she happened to have brought perfumes along with her on her barge. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. And this, of course, is a highly sexual image. This is the idea of the rhythmic beating of the silver strokes against the water to arouse the responsive body of water that is responding to the sort of phallic oar with amorous, a similar, faster, and quickening amorous rhythm. And now we get to, for her own person, it beggared all description. She did lie in her pavilion, cloth of gold of tissue, or picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outwork nature. And this is, of course, back here, we've got the same. We've got her, the person of herself, and we've got this for her own person, and now for the person of herself. She was laid under a pavilion of cloth of gold of tissue, apparelled and attired like the goddess Venus, commonly drawn in picture. So we've got that idea of the picture, but here, or over-picturing or picturing that Venus, where we see the fancy outwork nature. So she was a better picture of Venus than the Venus painted in which imagination had already improved on nature. So Cleopatra is better than that, more enticing than that. We've got the pretty dimpled boys, which we also have in North, and we have the diverse colored fans. But look at this, whose wind did seem to glow the delicate cheeks which they did cool, and what they undid did. And remember, we've been talking about this idea of paradox. What they undid did. So they're cooling the cheeks, but in fact, they're bringing a glow, a warmth, a sensuality to that very same person. And Agrippa is, rare for Anthony, of course. And then Enobarbus again goes back to North. His speech is very much from North. And North is an Englishman from Elizabeth's reign. He's a Protestant. He's a man who is probably more an antique Roman than a Dane, as we remember from Horatio at the end of Hamlet. He doesn't necessarily approve of all of this sensuality, but we've got the description here in North, and then we see again this majesty and also this magic of imagination. From the barge, a strange invisible perfume hits the scents of the adjacent wharfs. The city cast her people out upon her, and Antony, enthroned in the marketplace, did sit alone, whistling to the air, which but for vacancy had gone to gaze on Cleopatra too, and made a gap in nature. And this is an amazing image that is nowhere in North. In North, we've got all the people following along, so many people following the edge along the wharf, that they've left Antony alone. Antonius was left post alone in the marketplace, in his imperial seat, to give audience. And there went a rumor in the people's mouths that the goddess Venus was come to play with the god Bacchus for the general good of all Asia. When Cleopatra landed, Antonius sent to invite her to supper to him. So we've got the playful story of how she refused to go to him, but we don't have anything like this amazing image in Shakespeare, which is literally talking about the idea of a vacuum. So we have the city cast her people out upon her, out upon the wharfs, and Antony, enthroned in the marketplace, did sit alone, whistling to the air, which but for vacancy had gone to gaze on Cleopatra too, and made a gap in nature. In other words, if it weren't for the fact that nature abhors a vacuum, if it weren't for the physics of existence, the air itself would have gone to the wharfs to stare at Cleopatra. So look at what Enobarbus has been given to report. He's a Roman, he's been in Egypt, he's laid eyes on Cleopatra. He's coming to Rome, and now he is reporting. He's the witness. It's almost like the chorus in Greek drama. He's the witness to this queen of Egypt, this Asian, oriental figure that transcends the Roman or the English imagination. And he's saying, she's so phenomenal, she bends the laws of physics.